Hello and welcome to the Scriptcase Q&A video. There is also a live webinar Q&A session if you are interested, so do make sure that you sign up and take part, where you can also ask your own questions on the chosen topics, or should I say questions, that have been presented by you, our users. So I will dive straight in and start with the first question which is presented by Octavio from the USA. And he asks, is it possible to explain the Scriptcase file folders? So to be honest, it is a two-pronged question. So there are two responses to this one, because depending on the Scriptcase file and folders which are actually part of the question, whether that be the Scriptcase installed file and folders, or whether that be the Scriptcase deployed folders. So let's have a quick look at those. So we have here on my Windows 10 machine, the Windows or the program files folder should I start with. We have here, if I scroll up, it says here program files folder. And within the program files folder, I then have, scrolling down, the netmake folder. Okay, and so within that, I have then the multiple installations of Scriptcase. So here I do have the 7.3 version, which is an older version. And we have also the previous 8.1 version, which supports the previous or older version of PHP, and also then the latest version of Scriptcase. So checking out each of these folders, you will actually see that they are very similar, just of course with updated files and components. So checking out here the latest 8.1 version, the folders we have here, we have components, the www root, we have the log.txt file, open.bat, Scriptcase install log, as well as the uninstallation files that are required for Scriptcase to deinstall from your operating system. So anytime you open a support ticket, you may want to include here the log.txt file. So if I open that up, it will show here a log of the Scriptcase installation. So this is already installed. Okay, so when you start it up, it actually creates this log file, and there you will have all the information about your operating system, all of the files, your email address, your accounts, and so forth. Okay, so that is then required when you then open a support ticket, or not required, but it definitely highly suggested, or I would definitely recommend that you actually include that if you open a support ticket, if you have any problems running Scriptcase. Now for the installation, you may want to include here the Scriptcase-install log. So this is then the log only for the installation. And if I open that also here with Notepad, we can then view the log output of that. Okay, so that is then also important if you have any installation problems. We have then also here the components folder, and within the components we have the Apache folder as well as the PHP folder and some MSI files. Now these are actually setup files, and we have here Apache and PHP, which are of course required for web services. Now PHP is what we develop in, and Scriptcase is also developed within PHP and required to run of course all of our scripts and applications that we then create within the Scriptcase environment. The Apache folder is for the hosting of the Scriptcase platform. So that is actually required by Scriptcase to run that. And then if we check here back in the root folder, and we have here the open.bat file, and then if we open this up also with Notepad, so I open this with, open it here, edit with Notepad, ++, and if I open that there, we'll see that it actually opens the web browser and starts a HTTP link, which is of course a web link, and that is provided here by Apache within this folder. Okay, then we have the www root folder, and within here we will find then the Scriptcase application, and here we have then the Scriptcase folder, the fave icon, the initial page where you log in or the redirection for that, and of course a robots.txt file to protect the folder. We have then also the Scriptcase folder, and within here we have all of the configuration files and everything you see within the development environment. Now if I continue on down here to the app folder, here you see I have many applications, and these are basically all of the applications or all of the projects with the related applications that I have generated within Scriptcase. Okay, so even if I have deleted them, you may have one remaining here, but otherwise the project that you are currently running is actually located within this folder. Of course, if you delete the project, then it should also delete this application or the folder here within here. Okay, within the backup folder, we then also have backup files. Okay, you can't really use these, so I have tried to use these. I'm not sure if there is a way to hack these and use them, so that is something you would have to contact support for, of course, in such a case. Otherwise, you must perform the backup via the interface and there generate the zip file. But this is then basically where all of the applications are then stored and then basically compressed. Within the conf folder, we have here the Scriptcase configuration. Devil is also then for features and functionalities which are included within Scriptcase. For instance, you see here the button, class, we have here converser, folders, generator, help, and so forth. Okay. Then we continue on to the doc, and here we have then the manual generator examples, or in fact, should I actually correct that? This is actually the doc folder for which you have your export. So when you run your applications from your environment and it generates the folder here within the app, so this is where it then generates the folder. The documents that are actually uploaded, the doc folder that we have here is actually for the documentation generator or the manual generator that we have within Scriptcase. So that is there required. We have then also an examples folder where we have all of these systems which are available as examples within Scriptcase. Within the file folder is where you have all of the uploaded files and documents which you use within your development environment. So for instance, we have here our application folder, and this is where then the applications are generated. So if I open this one, we have here my lib folder, and if I check in some of these others, if they are recently generated, I will have all of the applications there. You see some of these are actually empty and just only include the library folder, but do not include other applications. Where I have generated those applications, they will then be available here. Now, when we actually use our applications and upload our documents and files, this is then the location here within the file folder where the documents and images are actually uploaded. So they are not actually included here within the app and _lib folder, which would be the typical location for your deployed applications. They will be here within the file folder. Okay, we then also have the log folder where all of the various logs are then produced. We then also have the production folder, which is then required by Scriptcase to generate all of the applications and your projects. So that is essentially the Scriptcase folder. Now we do also have one other folder here with our question, because the question is it possible to explain the Scriptcase file folders? And we also have one other folder, which was then the deployment folder, which then includes all of our applications as well as the libraries and so forth. So let's have a quick look at that one. So here, for instance, I have a deployment of Scriptcase, and we have that here on a remote server that I have here within the office. Now, it is basically a local development because it is on a server locally. It doesn't mean it's online, but I can make it accessible online because it's on a local server. Even if it's locally on my machine, I would essentially just have the project deployed to a folder, which is what this is. Okay, so within this folder, whether that be on your online hosting or locally, you'll have the following folders or applications, let's say, because of course they will be your forms, your grids, your blank applications, or the applications which you have generated within Scriptcase. So the general ones would of course be here the app ones, or maybe you've called them sec for the security applications, and all of these others, they will all be named as you have either your tables or as you have personally named them. Now, if I continue on down here, we have here our index.php file, which performs all the redirection and passes then the end user to the correct starting page, as well as performs the login and so forth. Now, the main folders here would then be here our _lib. Okay, all of the other folders are then of course generated by Scriptcase for your platform. So you should know really what the majority of these folders or applications are. Within our lib folder, we have the basic libraries of our deployed platform. So if I expand this a little more, we can check out then each folder, and we have here first of all our buttons folder, and within here we have then each of the button themes which have been associated to your project. So if you are using multiple themes, which I am within this project, I have 4 themes applied there. I have here the blueberry, guava, midnight and rhino theme, and so for each of those I have a separate button folder or theme folder, and they are then deployed with my project here within the buttons folder. The same is also applied for my chart. Within the chart folder, I have then all of the chart configuration for the project, which you are then basically configuring within Scriptcase. So the theme and so forth. Within the configuration folder, we have the configuration of your deployed project. Okay, so this folder is actually, I find it very important. The reason being, and you see here already, I have a copy of my prod.config file. And this is actually my production environment configuration file. Okay, so this is very important. It contains my database connection, my passwords, and the important configuration so that my platform works in the first place. Now, when you initially deploy your project, and if you check out last week's webinar, then of course you will see how the production, or because there I actually explain the importance of this folder as well as this file and what it actually looks like when we first deploy our project. Because when we deploy our project, we do not have a prod.config file here. We actually have the configuration file so that when we start to log into our initial deployment, we then set up our backend, as in our database, as well as any APIs that we may have, and specify our PHP time zones, which is very important for our deployed project. Now, once that has been done within the online or browser version of your project, then this prod.config file is created, and it will then contain the configuration files. So whenever I update my project, I have here a copy of it just in case something goes wrong with this one, and then an extra file would be included within here which would actually then initiate the setup. So on a live platform like this one, for instance, we would then want to always remove that extra file so that there is no confusion whether it's a live or a new platform. That also again depends on your deployment. Okay, so that is very important. Okay, then we have here also our CSS folder, and as it states CSS, it is actually our theming folder, so where we have all our themes. And as I mentioned previously, I have multiple themes applied for this project, and each of those themed folders are available in here with all of the CSS styling as well as any required files. Here we then also have the file folder. So by default, when we upload documents and images, which within the advanced deployment, again, checking last week's video, you will see how you can actually change the default path for this. And this is actually the default directory where then the doc and image folder would then be deployed, and where then all of the images and documents which you upload within your produced environment would then also be located. So we then also have our font folder. If we have any extra fonts, they would be included here. We have then also all of our friendly URLs here within ini files or text files even, and they are then configured and basically processed from this folder. We have then also the Google Fonts folder where any Google fonts that we have deployed within our project are located. We have then also the image folder for our platform. Okay, so any images we use within our platform, so logos or lines or backgrounds or anything like you see, there's icons and button images here, and more icons and the calendar image, icon insert and so forth. Then with these images, they are then used within the within your environment or within your platform, should I say, that you have deployed. We have then also the JavaScript folder, which is also required by the Scriptcase environment, so the deployed platform that you generated. We have here then also all the language keys, which can then also be used within your project. Again, they are then available within the Scriptcase platform and backend. We have then here our lib folder, and the lib folder is actually the libraries for Scriptcase. Okay, so you don't really want to adjust these. You want to leave them as they are. The libraries that you are possibly looking for would be here, the full named libraries folder, and here, for instance, I already have here the group folder, a Scriptcase folder, and assist folder from the libraries which are included within this project, but possibly not used. So here, the Scriptcase and assist ones are not used. There's no files included there, but the one I'm using here is the files, and here I have then all of my assets which have been deployed. So I can actually adjust these here directly and make changes to, for instance, to a form or to the login page or to a specific menu that I have actually created myself and then used within Scriptcase. So we then also have the menu icons folder, and here are all the menu icons for Scriptcase, again required by the platform that you have developed. We have here also the OAuth folder, which is required for Google. So if you're using the Google authentication, then that is what this folder is here. For the prod folder, now this is the production environment of Scriptcase. Again, this is all the files that is available for the Scriptcase backend, as well as then anything else that may be required or that you could also use within your project. So if I expand this a little and come here into the lib folder, we see here that I have some JS files, some PHP files, some CSS files, and of course we could actually use these within our project. And if I come here to the third, we have here all of the libraries which are included within Scriptcase by default, and again we are able to use these or request the use of them within our project and then have them used. For instance, we have here Font Awesome, which we already have quite a few videos on. jQuery is also included here, Bootstrap as well. So there's no need to actually go ahead and download those external frameworks when they are already used by Scriptcase. They are already deployed within this third folder, and you can then also use them within your project. Okay, so that's all of the files and folders that are associated with Scriptcase really. Any others would essentially be created or generated by you. Okay, then coming to our next question, we have a question here from Nico from South Africa, and he asks, multiple records form. How do you get the IDs of records selected? Example would be have a button that would duplicate the selected records and refresh the form with new record count. Okay, so this is quite an extensive question, so I'm really going to more or less direct you, Nico, into the correct direction. Okay, so first of all, the multiple records form. If you want to actually select individual records from a list, then you will want to create a grid and not a form. And the grid, essentially, you kind of turn into a form, which allows you then to make your selections of those relevant IDs or multiple records. And then with a button, you can duplicate, you can insert, you could advance, and yes, refresh a form, for instance, or navigate back to a form with those specific records. So what I'll do is I'll direct you in the right direction so that you can actually check that out. And for that, I have here already a grid created. So if I go ahead and run this grid application, we'll see it's a very basic grid, and it's using the samples table from the samples theme or template that is available within Scriptcase. So if you want to see just an example of the employers or employees, then do check that out. And I should also mention that there is also more than likely a sample of this within the samples theme. But for now, let's just have a quick look here at the grid application. So you see it's a very basic grid. There is no selections here. There is nothing here. So I could, of course, go ahead and make all of these adjustments in here and adjust my fields and make many changes and just about anything else. Okay, so then within our grid application, here I have grid employees. And as I mentioned, you can take this from the samples database and check that out. I have all the fields here. I'm not going to go ahead and make any adjustments here. Really, it's just to show you really quickly how you can actually create this sort of functionality. So I'll start off here within my events. And here on script init, I will add here a variable, and I'll just call it I, and I'll say that equals 0. Okay, and then I'll also say we have a total checked because we want to have some checked there, and I'll say that equals an array. Okay, so that's quite important. We want that to equal an array there, and with that we can then go ahead and use it or attach something to it, should I say. So if I go ahead and save that and then come here to on record, I could add some extra functionality here. For instance, if I say total equals tot, and we can then, we would actually have to add an if empty here, because if it's empty, then we don't want to have any errors there. So if I go if and open and close the brackets, and if I go empty here, I say empty, and I need to open close brackets again, and then here I say tot, because if my total is empty, then I want to not output anything, because then it's nothing. Okay, so then here I'll open and close that, make sure it's closed again, and then within this I could then, for instance, add an extra array and colorize the fields and so on. But for now I'm just going to leave it like that. So if it's empty, it's nothing, otherwise total equals tot. And then on footer, I have then here, this is very important, we need to enable the on footer as well in a moment. So on the on footer, I'll say the tot equals the array that we have then initiated. So I'll save that as well. And I come here to the layout, header and footer, because I need to enable the footer now to make sure it's displayed. And that with this, it then enables here my on footer event. Because if I'm not displaying the footer, then it will not trigger the event. Okay, so that is very important. Okay, so if I go ahead and run that now, then, well, let's see what happens. We have here a load of variables, and of course we will want to make some adjustments there. Let's just go grid employees, and there's not much of a difference other than the display that we had removed and so forth previously. Okay, so I'll come back here to the grid, and what we want to do here is on the buttons, we want to create a new button. And the new button, if I choose here run, okay, it's a run button, and I'll call it select option, okay, or employee in this case, AMP, okay, create. And now within this run button, I can actually run a process, okay, so whenever I click it, and here basically I have a load of code I can just copy and paste in here. So I'm going to do that, and you're going to see basically I have this used on another form, or grid should I say, and I am already running some processes here. Okay, so first of all, our array equals I, or our variable I equals I, and the total checked is then our array. Okay, and that then equals here our ID worker. Now this is something I've added for the specification. Like in this case, you see at the bottom here, I have then also an insert. Okay, so during the on record, so while it's running, it's actually going to go ahead and is going to insert here into another table, okay? And then it will insert the records for me, okay? So these variables here that I have, these are actually received on the on application in it. Of course, I don't have them here, so this will not function here, and it will more than likely give me an error. So I will go ahead and delete that for now, but you already see basically how you can actually use this, okay? So this is on the on record, and we're not finished yet because we have also on finish. And again, for on finish, I have a load of code again, and here I'm basically taking our total variable and I'm increasing the count. So here I'm saying the total checked, and then I'm basically counting them all the time. And then the total selections equals here my total. Okay, so I'm counting then how many are selected within this grid, and then I'm outputting that here to my total select variable. Okay, and then I have here my workers, and I'm looping here through my workers or employees in this case that I have selected. So total checked equals here my workers. And then here at the bottom again, you'll see that I have again some functionality going on here. I have here a PHP method which I call, and that actually is again another insert which inserts into a calendar table. Okay, so again I could go ahead and run that, but in this case it's not available, so I will remove it. But otherwise below this I'm also displaying a success message. Okay, so I'm using here the SC alert macro, and I'm displaying here some messages depending or configured within these values here. And then once that's completed, I'm redirecting to a new form, which is pretty much what wants to happen in this case. So again, I will go ahead and remove this. I'll leave the SC alert, and here we can leave this pretty much as it is because we're checking for it. And if I go ahead and run this application again, and I go grid employees, and now we see the difference. See, now we have now checkboxes here which we can apply, and a button called select emp, which we then click and then passes and processes through exactly what we want to achieve. So what I had then previous was inserting, first of all of those records into a separate table, and then when it finished, I then added those new values as well as how many. Basically, in this case, it was those original values which I've passed to this grid application, and then from here I pass it then to another form, and that then does any further calculations and then displays some information to the end user. And that is basically how you would actually achieve this sort of functionality. Okay, so I'll leave this as it is, and remember I have removed here from the on record here the insert, so it is possible to add an insert there, and you may not have the macros and everything that you have available here within this specific part of the application. In those cases, just pop over here to the on record or the on script init or any of these other events where you have these functionalities available here, where you have the examples as well as the macros available, where you can just click them, add them, and then all you have to do is really just copy and paste that into your other parts or segments that you want to actually use it within Scriptcase. In some cases, you may find it may not work. In such a case, do check the manual, because it will specifically tell you whether it will work in the grid or the form. But still, trial and error. That's the way to go, and you will actually find out whether that macro that you want to use may actually work within a button, within an event that is not supported, let's say. In some cases, they actually do work. It just doesn't tell you. Or here, like we see, the functionality for our clicky events is not available. So we do actually have to pop here to the events and then create that code, unless, of course, you want to create it by hand. That is entirely up to you. So before we finish up with this grid application and this select, we want to make sure that we adjust our variables. So on run of our application, we are requested our variables here, and within our application, if we come down here to application and then global variable, we can set all of these as out, as they are out. They're not required to come into our application. So we set them as out and then run that again. Our grid application will start off straight away with the checkboxes. And of course, if we send anything to this grid application, in those cases, we would want to have the variable as a type in. So I will put this project on with the video, so you will be able to download this and actually check out this grid application. So what I'll do is then I will generate here the source code and then basically deploy this project with, of course, the amazing new features that are available within Scriptcase for rapid deployment. And then with that, I can then very quickly pass this on to you within this Scriptcase video. Okay, so here we have the Q&A, and using the new deployment method, I can just deploy it or export the project, which is what I will do now. Okay, so coming then to one of our next questions, which is really just a quick question. So here we have a question from Risotta, I think it's Risotta, from Risotta Filippo from Italy. Hello there. So he asks then, is there the possibility of managing the daily scheduling of different resources in the Scriptcase calendar application? Or will it be implemented in the future in an upcoming release? Okay, so I actually found this question a little confusing. Sorry, Risotta. Yeah, I hope I pronounced your name correctly. I did find it a little confusing. So I'm going to try and answer the question for you. Okay, so you're saying daily scheduling of different resources. So the different resources could well, of course, be the applications or resources that you have created and generated within your application. Now, the way I have processed this sort of scheduling, let's say, whether that be hourly, daily, weekly or monthly, is typically either on load of the menu application. So when a user logs in, they load the menu, it then processes a script in the back end. And then of course, if it's the first time they log in, because then you want to process that as well. Otherwise, every time you load the menu, it will load your script, and you don't want that. So you want to run that once every time they log in, and you can just run a method, for instance, a PHP method, which you can create within your menu application. Now, an alternative, which is something I have done on many occasions, or typically actually do, is I create a blank application. And within the blank application, I specify all my features, my functionalities that I want to run at specific times, and then I create a cron job within my hosting environment or within my server, and that then pings the cron job, or the blank application should I say, and that then manages these scheduling of different resources. So I do hope that answers your question. I do hope that actually comes along. Otherwise, of course, ask again, not a problem. So to our next question, again, another quick one. We have Brian. I'm not going to pronounce your last name. I'm very sorry, just to make sure, because I hate pronouncing people's names wrong. Okay, so your question from Netherlands was how to use a debugger tool like Xdebug for custom internal library functions on a local host development environment. Now, initially when I first saw this question, I thought, and I Googled a little bit. So let me come back there. If I open up my web browser here and let me check here. So I have there another one. So if I come here to Xdebug, we have here the installation of Xdebug. Now, because you are developing your project locally, as you say here, on a local host development environment, okay? So in any situation where you would want to use a debugger tool, you would need to install it locally. Okay, so for that, I would highly advise check out the installation options here for Xdebug, or an alternative maybe is here on the Pimba engine, which is quite nice. This also gives you some MySQL output as well. And of course, again, with a Google search, I've also found here the Cloudways top 6 PHP debugging tools for smart developers. And each of these, of course, you would need to set them up locally. And then with that, because you would be developing your library functions locally also, you would then again be able to use those debug tools. Now, I am not I would say I'm not sure, but I highly doubt that the Xdebug would be able to understand these Scriptcase macros. So that is the only part where it falls down. So of course, if you want to combine the two, I'm not entirely sure, but it is something I will try and find out, and more than likely test myself actually, because it's a very, very good question. Okay, so then we have one more question, and we have here another quick question from Richard from South Africa. And he asks, what is the best way to technically implement push notification services within a Scriptcase application, especially in the mobile space, enhancing the communication with users on a community platform? So of course, a very long question, and Richard, it's a great one, and I did like this, and I actually did wonder about that myself. And again, I did a little Googling, and well, we have a few options, but I did wonder on this, because we have here push notifications with PHP MySQL, and we could of course follow one of these guides and more than likely implement this sort of functionality with Scriptcase, because again, we have our blank applications, methods. You can really integrate things like this quite easily. Okay, it's just a case of making those adjustments to the database connection. For instance, we have here the session. Okay, so here you may have to make some adjustments because the session information would be different, and here the push PHP, well, you would call a method instead, and again, you would have to make those variables change and so forth for your specific project within Scriptcase. Again, I would use either external libraries. That is definitely a good option. So you could, for instance, download one of these pre-built push notification systems and just call them within your application within Scriptcase. Well, as I said, develop and actually use your methods as well as, of course, your events within Scriptcase to create those specific applications. Now, as I was saying, I was wondering whether the PWA would be an option for this, because if you check out a previous webinar or video that we did, there was one specifically on creating PWA applications with Scriptcase, and that had this functionality. So do check that out. I believe I did go over how to actually configure that. I didn't actually set it up, but it seemed pretty straightforward. If, of course, you are used to configuring those sort of things in general, then I'm sure you will also find it straightforward. Otherwise, of course, hit us up, ask us for a full-blown webinar, and of course, we could grab one of those examples that we have online for PHP push notification systems and possibly integrate it into Scriptcase. Or you never know, maybe that feature would even be built into Scriptcase in the future. Okay, so that's pretty much it for our Scriptcase Q&A session this week, or this month, should I say. And of course, we will be back with the next one next month. So do be sure to get your questions in nice and early. A lot of these were pretty much in the last minutes, hence why some of the quick responses, because I had no time really to prepare for those. Again, this is our first session and we thought we'll just check it out. So if you do like the idea of this Q&A session, having some examples of how to actually achieve something within Scriptcase, then just let us know. And otherwise, there is always the live webinar sessions. Now that is also the live webinar session where we actually go through full setups and full installations or project development. And of course, there you may be able to learn a great deal. But otherwise, of course, again, hit us up on the Q&A channel and we will help you out. And again, if you like these videos, do let us know in the comments if there's anything you would maybe change, where you would like to have more rapid questions, because there are more questions that I have there. I believe there were 3 more, but of course we can't answer all of them. And I believe there were also 1 or 2 doubts that I also had myself. Okay, so I hope you have enjoyed this video. And until next time, my name is Jamie Oats, and I hope you have enjoyed this Q&A session with Scriptcase.